it's Esther Braithwaite from Esther Joy Knits, and today I'm going to show you how I prepare to knit one of my Izzy dolls. We're going to be making what I call a doll in a ball. It's just a way of organizing your yarn to make it a little easier as you're working through your doll. You can see that it has pre-measured amounts of all of the yarns that you're going to need for the doll, and it follows through the color changes in the order that you're going to knit them. What I like about organizing my yarn this way is it makes it very easy to transport. You can put it in a knitting bag or throw it in a purse rather than having all of these balls of yarn. It also makes a wonderful gift. There are a few supplies that you're going to need to make your doll in a ball. First, you're going to want a copy of the pattern that you're using. I'm using the Pretty Izzy Dolls pattern, which is available free on my Ravelry page, but you can use any of my doll patterns and just follow along in the instructions. You'll need the yarn that's specified in the pattern, a measuring tape, a pair of scissors. If you want to make a center pull ball, I'll be using a ball winder, a pair of needles in the size that you're going to use for your gauge, some cellophane tape, and a couple of strips of paper if you want to make the yarn labels. You can see that I've added my logo here. But this is a great opportunity to add a gift message if you're going to be handing this out as a gift. I know that some local yarn stores have used these patterns in classes. It's a great way to use the yarn store logo if you're going to be providing this to your students. So let me clear off my workspace and then I'll show you how I go about making the doll in a ball. So the first thing you're going to want to know is how much yarn you use per row or per round of the pattern. I've made enough of these that I know that when I use a DK weight yarn, I need about 20 inches per row or per round, but I'll show you how to figure that out using this worsted weight yarn. What you're going to want to do is make a swatch. I've cast on 34 stitches, which is the number of stitches per row in the pattern when you're knitting it flat. And I've just worked a couple of rows in stockinette stitch, knitting on the right side and purling on the wrong side. And when I get to the end of this row, what I'm going to do is frog back and measure how many inches of yarn I've used for one row of the pattern. So I'm just going to slide this right off my needle. I'm going to pinch here at the first stitch and just unravel to the end of that row. And this is the amount of yarn that I need for one row or one round of the pattern. Okay, so I'm just going to start where I've pinched it and measure to the end of my row of yarn here. So I've got 10, 20, and a little bit, just about 25 inches of yarn when I'm using a worsted weight. Now comes the fun part. I'll show you how to take this yarn and put it into the doll in a ball. I like to spread my measuring tape out on my working surface. You can use a bit of cellophane tape if you want to keep it in place. And to work out the amounts of yarn, I'm going to be working from this pattern. All of my patterns include a knitting chart, and this is a helpful way to show you how much you're going to need of each color. It shows you very clearly the color changes and the number of rows for each color. I'll be working from the Pretty Izzy Dolls pattern, but you can use the chart from any of my patterns to make a doll in a ball. I'm going to be showing you how to make a hand wound ball first. And when we make a hand wound ball, we want to start with the black for the shoes. We start at the bottom and work towards the top. I've got my black yarn here. And you can see that we need 4 rows of black yarn. So I'm just going to go ahead and measure out 20, 40, 60, 80 inches of yarn. Because this is our cast on row, we also need to give ourselves enough yarn for our cast on and a long tail that we're going to use for sewing up the doll when we finish. So I'm going to go ahead and add an extra 40 inches of yarn to my yarn estimate there. When I've measured out my 120 inches of yarn, I'm just going to snip it with my scissors, and then I'm going to join the white for the socks, which is our next color. So to join our next color, what I'm going to do is just tie a loose knot in my yarn and then measure out the amount that I need. And again, we've got 4 rows of white for the socks, plus a row here where we're carrying the yarn behind for our color work. So I'm going to measure out 100 inches of the white yarn. And we just keep doing this as we work through our color changes. Next up is our skin color for our legs. We need 6 rows of our leg color. So again, I'm just tying a very loose knot and measuring out 120 inches. And it doesn't matter if you've got a little extra yarn. Extra is better than too little. I'm going to add my bodice color. Working with this nice sunny yellow today. So again, I tie a loose knot. The bodice is 16 rows. So we need 320 inches of yarn. I'm just gonna, you can see that my tape measure is spread out in a 20-inch length here, and I'm just gonna do that 16 times. I'll join my skin color again for my face. Making a loose knot. And then measuring out 8 lengths for the 8 rows of the doll's face. Next we have the hair, and for our hair you'll notice that we have 4 full rows, and then we start doing decreases. So we're not going to need the full amount of yarn for the entire doll's head. I'll measure out 4 rows. And then you'll see that we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rows remaining. I'm going to measure out another 4 rows, which should give me plenty once I include the decreases. Now, our pattern shows us knitting from our shoes to the top of our head, but what it doesn't show is the skirt that we're going to pick up around the doll's middle. The skirt isn't shown in the pattern on the chart, but if we go back in our pattern, we can see that the skirt increases from 32 stitches to 49 stitches. And there are 13 rows in the skirt pattern. So instead of measuring out 20-inch lengths for the skirt, I'm going to measure out 30-inch lengths. And that should give me enough to finish up the doll's skirt. So all in all, we've got all of the yarn that we need for our doll here. You can see it's sort of in a loose pile. By keeping the yarn loose, we should avoid any snags while we're winding the ball. And since we're going to be making a hand wound ball, all you need to do is start from the end of your skirt color and just wind all the way through your color changes. Our ball with our black yarn, which is going to be the working yarn that we cast on with when we cast on for the doll's shoes. Now, if you're going to be making a center pull ball using a ball winder, the process is exactly the same. Except that you work from the top down. So you would start with the skirt and then move on to the hair, the face, the bodice, legs, socks, and shoes. So when you finish the process, again, you'll end up with a loose pile of yarn ending with the black yarn on top. You'll be able to hook that end into your ball winder. And you can see the color changes that work through the ball. So if you want to, you can take your strip of paper for your label and a bit of cellophane tape. You can just wrap the label around the ball. I like to use about 1 3/4 by about 8.5 inches. And it's just enough to add a little more security to the ball while you're working with it. So there you have your doll in a ball. Come back in our next video when I show you how to turn this into the doll.